Hi everybody, I'm Tajan from Tajan Renderos Coaching. And if you or anybody else that you know is struggling with facing insults and slights in the workplace day in and day out, and you're wondering how you can really face that daily and maintain a sense of dignity and integrity, then this vlog is for you. So I have a guest today that's gonna contribute like a ton of wisdom around this topic that I know that we all definitely have either struggled with or know somebody who struggles with this. So Dr. Shanesha Brooks-Tatum is the founder and CEO of the Life, Balance and Wellness Institute, and she's a self-described woman wellness warrior. So without further ado, I'm gonna introduce you all to Shanesha. Thank you so much, Shanesha, for being here with us today and for sharing with our audience.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So before we do a deep dive into this content, what I wanted you to do is just tell our audience a little bit more about the mission of your organization and the work that you do.
Okay, great. So the mission of the Life, Balance and Wellness Institute is to support Black women in their quest to live well and thrive. And we really exist as a counterpoint to the dominant narrative that says that Black women are health deficient, or we lack wellness, or we lack wellness structure, because a lot of the information, as you know, that we hear about Black women tends to center on the fact that we have higher rates of diabetes, of obesity, of breast cancer, of all of these different health disparities, which are true, but at the same time, we over the generations have developed wellness structures and wellness models and rituals that serve us as women. And so we really want to focus on that and elevate that and have honest conversations about places where we might get stuck or where we might need additional support. So the Institute came out of a conference that we've been doing here in the Atlanta area for the last 5 years, which is the National Black Women's Life, Balance and Wellness Conference. And it really brings women from all over the world together, or I should say all over the nation, but we've had some international participants as well. And we have workshops that are really dynamic and interactive that explore these topics. So really our mission is basically to create a space and tools for Black women to create more wellness and balance in their lives, however they define that for themselves.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. So Shanesha, I know that microaggressions is something that a lot of people experience and don't necessarily have a word to describe it. And so this is the word. And so I'm wondering if you can just tease apart, what do microaggressions actually mean and how does experiencing that create harm?
So microaggressions are those slight, offhanded comments or insults that you might experience in a social environment. And they're not often identified or characterized as blatant racism, but at the same time, they are attacks on your spirit or your soul as a person. Your identity is sort of attacked, and this kind of can create internalized self-deprecation over a period of time, as well as depression in some instances. And so if you imagine yourself going through your daily life, and people can think of microaggressions as something very small, but I think it has a cumulative effect that over time, if you're constantly being, things are being said about you, such as, oh, I didn't know that you were that smart, or how could you do that, or I still consider marriage to be between a man and a woman. So, I accept you as my friend, but, I don't agree with your marriage or your partnership, same-sex partnership. And so I think over time, these things can weigh you down and kind of wear against your spirit. And so if you think of it as a drop of water kind of hitting a rock continuously over time, that small act or that small contact with the rock will eventually break it down, and so erode it on the surface and maybe even burrow through the actual rock itself. So I think it's something that we as a society need to take more seriously, because in our society now, with this whole political correctness and just some of the strides that we've made in the last 20 or so years, blatant racism and calling people pejorative terms is not acceptable, but people still have a way of letting you know where they think you belong and where they think you don't belong. And so I think it's really important to identify those microaggressions and bring them to the attention of people who may be saying these things, and placing them into a larger context of what I mentioned earlier as macroaggressions. So these smaller acts of insults or sort of comments that sort of categorize people in certain ways point to larger social structural issues around violence against women or against people of color, against trans people, etc.
So if you think about just putting yourself in the position of a woman, for example, or a woman of color who's in the workplace setting, and somebody makes some off-color remark like that, like, gee, Shanesha, I didn't know you could write that well, wrote that proposal, like, geez, I didn't even know that. What do you think is an appropriate response in that very moment to a comment like that?
I see. I think it really depends. Sometimes, honestly, when that happens to me, I'm in such a state of shock that it's hard for me to sort of process and come back with something that would be productive. And I don't want to necessarily derail the interaction even further, although sometimes that happens. I think one thing you can do is talk to that person or ask them, like, why did you think that? Or what do you mean by that? And sort of just open up a conversation. Of course, if microaggressions happen consistently and on a regular basis in those one-on-one interactions, it can be exhausting to try to do that every time it happens, depending on how frequent it is. But I think one thing that, depending on the severity of the situation, I would suggest bringing it up to the HR office in your department as a working woman and letting them know about these different things that are happening, or even talking to other people who you trust at your workspace to see maybe if they're experiencing the same things and how it can be addressed.
So what I've noticed is we certainly have a lot of people talking about what microaggressions are, and certainly lots of women and women of color who ventilate with each other about experiencing that. And there's a lot of good content out there around naming it. And I feel like on the wellness side, there's not as much around what practical strategies you can take to maintain your sense of dignity and integrity, even if that happens to be the kind of workplace dynamic that you're in. And so I'm wondering, from a wellness perspective, what are some practical strategies that women or women of color can start to take on in order to maintain their wholeness, so that they're not leaving that kind of workplace environment small or shrunk or smaller versions of themselves, but still with their dignity intact and their integrity intact?
Mm-hmm. One thing that I've heard of friends doing is writing down a list of things that have bothered you over the day. You can kind of keep that list, or you can just write it all at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And then they either burn it or shred it at the end as a symbolic act of letting go and not internalizing it. So kind of taking it out of yourself and externalizing it, because it's really not about you in the first place.
That's right.
So acknowledging that, putting it on paper and shredding it or burning the paper is one sort of symbolic act that can help you release, the things that have happened. Another thing I do is journaling a lot. So I, journal about my day or talk about the things that I'm grateful for. So putting more of my energies into positivity, into the things that I feel are still went well with my day, even though I might have experienced some things that have kind of thrown me off balance. And then another thing I do is just to take time to myself and think and process it, and to not belittle or diminish my emotions, because I think sometimes, of course, you don't always have the time to process how you're feeling throughout the day, and then sometimes I know for myself, I can feel like maybe I shouldn't be feeling this bad about this, what happened, or this isn't as bad as X. But I think that it's not really productive personally to do that because you are entitled to feel the way that you do feel, and you feel that way for a reason. So you shouldn't diminish how you feel and just really process it and do whatever you need to do to let it go. If it's exercising, if it's meditating, if it's doing some yoga when you get home, or talking to a friend, I think really not allowing it to become like this toxic replaying sort of dialogue in your head is really important.
And what I would add, Shanesha, too, is just the importance of not shutting down when you're facing that. Because I think what I have observed is a lot of women completely numbing out.
Right.
And shutting down in order to survive.
Right.
But it becomes really hard to then manifest the next best thing for yourself if you're shut down. And if you're numbed out.
Right.
And so I think employing some of the strategies that you mentioned just now, you know, you do feel what you feel and you let that go through you, but then there's a process to process it. And it's not necessarily, none of what you suggested entails numbing out. Because I think that there's some unwanted consequences to doing that, that impact the rest of your life in ways that you really don't want.
Right. And I think also numbing out creates unhealthiness. Just toxicity, kind of like you said, creates unhealthy consequences throughout your life. And I've known of friends who have lived very healthy lives as vegans or vegetarians. Not saying that's the only way to be healthy, but they were really conscious in their diet and their exercise regimen in all areas of their lives, but they let emotional and work toxicity sort of take over their lives and develops, physical ailments because of it. And so I think another thing about the Life Balance and Wellness Institute is we really emphasize holistic wellness and think of wellness as a composite of all of these different factors and areas of our lives. So nothing is in isolation. And so we can't sort of think, oh, because I'm doing all of this, then this won't affect this area. Everything sort of ties in together because we're whole people.
Well, Shanesha, I want to thank you for just sharing all of your wisdom with our audience. What Shanesha and I would really like to hear from you. So what I want to encourage you guys to do is just let me know what was your biggest takeaway from this vlog by just leaving a comment below. Just come on over to tajanrenderos.com, and that's where the discussion is happening. You can leave a comment right there. You can also just sign up for our mailing list there if you want more email updates with vlogs like this, as well as other free content that we have available on the site. If you want to know a lot more about what Shanesha is up to, and she's up to a lot, you can check out her website information, which will appear on the screen right below. So you don't have to worry about where to find her. Just check out the details in the caption below, as well as in the show notes. So again, Shanesha, thank you. And again, if this vlog resonates with you and could be of help to anybody else, I encourage you to share it. And in the meantime, take care. Bye.